G'day Miha Fulcher. Welcome everyone, my name is Darren Kuzma and this is Mind the CRAIC. This is a series of webinars that we are doing on life improvement tools and life hacks, if you like. And the short subject that we're dealing with at the moment is study and learning. So before I get started, I'll introduce the topic, but I'd like to just check in with Zoom. I'm here live on a Zoom chat, and if you know how to participate, you can see at the top or bottom of your window, you can see there's a button for chat, and you can participate by typing anything in there, and I'll see that directly. I even put a little message in there for everyone. Hi everyone, welcome to Mind the CRAIC as a start. You can also participate, give me acknowledgements by giving me a thumbs up or a wave. There's a reactions box or a drop up, drop down menu, whichever way you want to put it, just so that I can know that you're following, that you're listening, that you're getting everything that I'm saying, or if you have any questions, you can put them in. Not only is there myself live on this Zoom chat and webinar, I also have Mandeep assisting me today. So if you're on any of the other platforms, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc., I'm not sure how many we're going on these days, but if you're on those, you can put in the comments section as we go. I like to see that there's acknowledgements, you can put love hearts, likes, whatever you like, or you can put questions in there and Mandeep will see those and she can pass them along to me so that I get them here on my live Zoom chat. So there's Mandeep on Zoom saying hello to everyone as well. Okay, so now that that's established, waves, thumbs up, hello for everyone, and if you could send me back, I'd like to see that too. Okay, so today's topic is actually about confusion. I'll say that correctly so that you're not confused. And if you were confused by the first thing that I said when I welcomed you today, I said G'day Miha Fulcher, and that is Irish for 100,000 welcomes. So just so that we've got everything above board and there's no confusion, that was my greeting in Irish with my best Irish accent that I can do. Okay, so when I talk about confusion, I'm not talking about the type of confusion and bewilderment that you might have when you see a young person these days watching a YouTube video of another person commenting on a YouTube video that they're watching that is a video of someone playing a computer game. Quite puzzling that can be, but we're not going to be dealing with that type of confusion, though there is a bit of crossover in what happens in that sort of scenario. People can be confusing, and again, understanding people and their emotions and their decisions, they can be quite irrational. We're not dealing with that subject either. We're dealing with confusion, particularly as it relates to study and learning. Now, the content that I'm using to discuss this comes from the study technology of L. Ron Hubbard. And the study toolkit is so broad, it's so wide, that what I'm doing in these webinars is I'm choosing some particular points that I think are deserving of highlight so that you can get a bit of a sample of how ahead of the curve L. Ron Hubbard was. Like, much of this technology was actually developed in the 60s and absolutely is completely relevant today and actually far ahead of its time. So getting a taste for some of these most important points, I hope that you'll then reach a bit further to discover the whole toolkit that L. Ron Hubbard has put together in what we call study technology. Okay, so I'm just going to have a look over here. Glancing, we're good to continue. Okay, so first I'd like to start off with some definitions. And I've got a definition of confusion here from the Oxford Dictionary. Let me read that to you. The state of being bewildered or unclear in one's mind about something. Okay, so we've got a couple of words in there. Bewildered means being puzzled, so it's kind of a bit of a synonym for confused, right? Then the second part, unclear in one's mind about something. So in your mind, there is something that you cannot see, let's say with certainty or with clarity, and perhaps it is in understanding. So not clear in your mind in some way. Now there is another definition. Uncertainty about what is happening, intended, or required. Okay, so looking at those two definitions, you can see that the idea of being uncertain or not knowing or having things be unclear is what leads to confusion. Let's have a look at the origin of that word from Middle English, which then comes from Latin, from confusio, which comes from the verb confundere, which means mingle together. So if you have a number of things and you mingle them together, so you make them associate very closely, come very close together, so perhaps they're not in a clear sort of arrangement in some ways, but they're all put together in a group, mingling or mixing, you could say. That leads to, or that is the origin of the word confusion. So hopefully I wasn't confusing you when I give you that definition, but if I round it out into my own words, we're looking at something that you're uncertain about, something that is not clear about what's happening, about what's intended or what's required. So there is something that's not known. So we'll take that as the main point. Now, further to that, L. Ron Hubbard actually added some other ideas to definition of confusion. So he also said that when we have a set of factors or circumstances and those things within the situation don't have an immediate solution, that causes a confusion. So again, it's something that you can't work out, or it's some solution that can't be worked out from a situation. Okay, and then added to that, a confusion is a confusion so long as no factor is clearly defined or understood. So you got a situation, you can't see which factor it is that it has a clear definition, there would definitely be confusion. And you may have experienced that, and let's look at that in life. If you have a ball of cables, you've got your mouse, your old mouse that used to connect, not Wi-Fi, but you have a mouse, you've got headphones, you've got other USB cables, and you threw them all in a box, and you pull out that big jumble, you're in a confusion. It doesn't seem to have a solution for how you pull it apart until you do something, and we're going to discuss that shortly. Okay. Thus, confusion, can cause a reelingness or a state of feeling dizzy, spinny, or whirling. Now, if you compare that to the example with the cables, if you look at what happens with your attention, and your attention is looking to solve that cable mix problem, your attention will immediately go to, where is the end? The end is a stable point. It is something that you know. Where is the USB connector and where is the mouse? Once you have identified those stable points, it then starts to ease and not be so confusing because you have a point within that jumble that is now known. Prior to that, it becomes quite difficult. If you look at a set of Christmas lights, quite often they don't have more than just a power connector. The end of it looks like every other part of the jumble. Can be quite confusing. But, as LRH said, a confusion is a confusion so long as no factor is clearly defined or understood. So as soon as you take a factor and you define it clearly or you understand that part, then you can unravel the confusion. Okay, so hopefully that sheds more light on confusion. If you have any input or if you have your own experience or idea of confusion and you'd like to share that, please go ahead and put that in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, moving on. So, confusion in life is dealt with quite differently from confusion in study. So let's take a look at that. In life, generally, if someone hears some information that's confusing, there is a bit of a mechanism that kicks in because it's uncomfortable to have a mystery or something that you don't know or to be confused about something. And usually in life, if you hear something and you don't know the solution to it, your mind, your brain will automatically insert a piece of information, usually and unfortunately something that confirms your biases, it confirms your ideas or your personal experience, or it comes from something you've heard that's related to that subject, either from a source of information that you consider is reliable, or a person may have said something on the subject that you really trust. So the ease that is the dis-ease that is created from hearing something that confuses you is very quickly remedied on a kind of an automatic basis. Now, I'll give you an example of this. When I was very young, around about 3 or 4 years of age, so no one had really taught me how to solve problems at that point in time, and I remember this as one of my earliest thoughts around that age. I remember seeing photos of my grandparents' family photos that were black and white. I remember seeing television of things around the turn of the century through the 1920s, and they're in black and white. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't ever see any picture older than like the further back than the 1930s or earlier that has color in it. So in my mind, having that confusion, or why is that? Why do I look at the present photos of family or television or things in the world around me, because that's all I knew, and see things in color? I then automatically inserted the conclusion that color was not invented in the world, not just in photos, but color didn't exist in the world until a certain time in the 1900s, mid-1900s or so. Now, as you can see, that's completely wrong, but it's what I did. I inserted something in my mind to make sense of it. And that conclusion sat with me for some time until I inspected the world around me and realized, well, there's a brick there from a building that is older than 100 years. So they couldn't have colored that brick. It's just not possible. A part of the brick had chipped off, etc., etc. So when we have things in life, we do things automatically. We have this automatic mechanism to stop you from being confused because it feels uncomfortable. Now, when we come to study, it's a little bit different, because you're not automatically trying to just be at ease with the information. You're actually trying to understand it. So when you come to something that you're studying, some text or some material about something, and you get confused, usually what happens is you try to remedy it in some way so that you can understand it. It's not as if you just come to a piece of information in a mathematical formula and you see the symbol that has this big E, and then you go, oh, that must mean it's time for the equation. That's what the equation means, instead of it being what is the sum of it. So in study, we have a slightly different approach than what we do in life. Now, confusion and study are, let's say, such broad subjects that we see the success of these books of, such and such for dummies, insert whatever the subject is, like biology for dummies, chemistry for dummies. Now, those books have been quite popular. Likewise, the different books on, explain stuff or how this works, or, that sort of thing. Different websites, different contents on online that you can see like that. Because people really do want to understand things. And what you will see, and I think this is a very good explainer of the success of this Blank for Dummies series, is that people want to have things made simple so they can understand them. Because when you get to an encyclopedia, for example, maybe in the 1800s, having an encyclopedic knowledge of the world was possible. These days, though, one subject on its own being advanced to such a high level, it isn't possible for you to have a professional understanding of every subject covered in an encyclopedia. So, as academia advances, usually they get highly specialized, and not only that, there are a lot of words that are related only to that discipline, but they tend to also have a higher level of English that goes with them. So when you bring things down to this something or other for dummies, you see that the English within those books is a bit more plain and a bit more simple. Now I'm going to tell you more about that approach a little bit later. But first, I would like to hear from you. Have any of you at home, watching this wherever you are, have you had any confusing experiences? Is there something that you tried to study and you got confused and you gave up, or you couldn't get past that confusion? So if there's anything at all that you'd like to put into the chat, make a comment on YouTube, Facebook, whatever it is, Mandeep will see that and send it across to me. I'd like to hear from you about all the different subjects that you've had encountered that you found confusing. Okay, so as I let you do that, I'm just going to put in the little message here saying, anything confuse you in study, ? And I just put that in there just so that you can see that as we're moving along. Okay, next step. We are going to look a little bit at the mechanics of being confused and how that relates to not understanding something. Okay, part of the solution. Really, confusion as a symptom within study usually has more to do with the subject of something that you're doing. So when there's an activity that involves doing or some practical application of something, usually that is where this feeling of confusion usually results. When you're studying something, certainly you can get confused, and that has a relationship to this other thing in doing this. And as I mentioned before, if you're doing something and you're confused, your attention is unable to fix on something when you're not able to solve any part of the situation in front of you. As a result, your attention going all around the place, you can actually feel a bit dizzy. So, when you identify some factor or some component of that, once you have done that, it'll then start to settle you down. So this is the basic way that you do it. If you're studying something and you find you're confused, then you go back to an earlier step or an earlier section within the material that you're studying, and you look for something that you didn't understand. You go from a point where you did understand things and you move forward gradually, looking at what you did understand, where you weren't confused, and you go to that section and look right at the end of that to find something that you then didn't understand. And then by clearing up that thing that you didn't understand, you will then be able to move forward without the confusion. So again, you can see how that relates to the definition. When there's uncertainty about what is happening or intended, or when you're unclear in your mind about something, when you get the thing that you're unclear about made clear through using a dictionary, in getting the word that is used in materials defined, or the object that you're dealing with, finding out something about it that you didn't understand through defining it or having it being told to you if it is not existing in a dictionary. But that solution then of handling the uncertainty, finding the meaning, is really the basic result, the basic method of handling confusion. Okay, so let's have a look at a couple of other things here. I mentioned before this whole idea of using your, or the popularity of the books Blank for Dummies. So one of the things that I have learned in study technology is that there is such a thing as gradients. Now, having gone to university myself for 5 years and done a lot of postgraduate study, I know in my professional field, I have taken a very gradual increase of the language. I've taken things in and had a gradual understanding, is at the level that I would talk at with another professional is certainly not understandable to someone in high school. And one of the reasons for that is that even if a person in high school was to attempt to read that information, the sheer volume of things that are misunderstood or not known builds up to such a huge amounts in the mind that even one sentence containing multiple words that you didn't understand kind of precludes the ability to understand it easily. So, coming back to the Blank for Dummies type books, or going backwards, you can also use children's books, because what they do is that they present a more simplistic idea using usually more simple English, and they introduce concepts in the most simple ways. So I remember trying to study up on quantum mechanics one time simply because I was interested, and I took a book on quantum mechanics and I didn't really get it at all. So what I did is I went to the library, I grabbed a few children's books, and usually they're quite short, but someone that's usually professional and knows all about it has written that. And generally what you find is that in that children's book you get the concept communicated to you in simple English. So grasping some basic concepts or getting an idea as you start to move up and maybe do something with primary school or high school, you've already got a concept of how something should be. Then as you encounter just a few more words that you don't understand, it makes it easier to clear them up and integrate those words you didn't understand with the material that you're now presented with. And then as you move up even further, you've got another level of words that you didn't understand, and again, not being too many words that you don't understand allows you to integrate that into the earlier concepts that you have taken in. So that is something that I definitely recommend, is looking at the gradients within study, the gradients of the material, the Blank for Dummies type books, whatever it might be. Some of the content online that gives you very, very simple explanations will then allow you to progress and learn and understand higher levels or more academic sort of content if that's what you're looking to study. Okay, sometimes information itself can be confusing. I'm not sure if you've ever tried to understand someone speaking another language. Well, even though they might be saying the right things, you have no idea what it is that they're saying because you don't speak that language. That would definitely be confusing. And in the same way, some books or some content can be just written in a confusing way. And no matter how many words you try to understand by using a dictionary or try to clear up, sometimes there are materials that exist that are just completely confusing. In that case, if you find you're getting frustrated and you've applied many of the different study tools, then you might just have to change source. And one of the most important things in selecting which material to go for is you look at who was the originator of the subject. Who was the first person to delineate the principles, the factors, the laws, or the concepts? Look for someone who has been a successful teacher. Someone who has participated in that field or accomplished or achieved things in that field, and use that person as source. And I know that L. Ron Hubbard has a long history of teaching people. When he wrote Dianetics in 1950, he had many years of the proliferation of Dianetics groups. He had a lot of experience in teaching people things. Not only that, but in the Second World War, he had a huge experience, being in the Navy, of teaching his juniors different things. So his experience in how to teach people has certainly been conveyed in all the study technology. Okay, so aside from a person that can be confusing and applying those gradients to different things and looking up words that you have not understood as the handling, I'm just going to check back over here in Zoom and see if we have any messages. I'm just going to give one question to Mandeep and see if she's got any other feedback coming across there. So if you are joining this on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or anything, and you have a question or a comment you'd like to make, please put it in on the comment section, and Mandeep, who is assisting me today, will be able to send that over and we can discuss that. I'd like to hear from you, so if you do have anything at all that you'd like to say, please pop that in. And if you're joining me on Zoom, very good. If you're joining me on Zoom, please, if you have any interaction that you'd like to give me or any feedback, please do go ahead and let me know. Okay, great. Okay, so I got that message from someone who mentioned something there on Facebook. Yeah, well, that was my life. When I was very young, I did think a lot, and that's what I came up with. Color had not yet been invented. Okay, so I'd like to just discuss something about how logical study technology is by using this point on confusion as an example. Something that you may be very familiar with, and I know it's happened to me a few times in life, is, well, have you ever had this experience? Have you ever walked from your bedroom where you've had an idea, or walk from one room in the house and you walk into another room? So I walk from my bedroom and walk into the kitchen and you forget why you were there. And you start looking around to try and see if something reminds you of what it was that you came into the kitchen for. And you start looking at the drawers and pulling them open. It's like, what did I need? So the natural solution to that is to go back where you had the thought. So sometimes you'll then glance back out of the kitchen and look back at your bedroom to see if you can remember, what was it that I was thinking of in there? Or sometimes you actually need to walk back into your bedroom, stand in the bedroom, and then you'll have the thought of what it was that you needed. So that process of going from I need something, having a thought or an idea that you need something, and then going somewhere and then forgetting what it was or being confused about what it was that you needed to do, quite naturally you go back to where you did know what you were doing and you did know, and by being in that location you can then sometimes discover. So whether it is you mentally return there or whether you physically go there, I think many of you will have experienced that in the past, and it's very natural the way that you approach that by following simply those steps. Well, in exactly the same way, and this is how logical, it's almost funny that no one has really spotted it in the way that L. Ron Hubbard did. It's very natural. You get to a point when you're studying something and you're confused. What do? You go back to where you weren't confused and look at the end of that section where you weren't confused and find something that you didn't understand. And use that valuable tool for study, which is a dictionary. Find out, start asking yourself questions. What did I not understand here? Why don't I get that? And get that defined and get it understood. Now you may find, like I did, being sometimes fairly creative or imaginative, that habit that you have in life where you start to make up things when they don't make sense. Okay, so I used that example earlier where I didn't understand why there were black and white photos and then color photos, and I just made up, well, color must have been invented and it didn't exist in life, right? So you may have experienced this in recent things in relation to the world that's happening, the activities in the world at the moment. You may not understand something about it, but you may have heard something on the media, you may have heard a friend say something, you may be following politics and not know anything about what's happening in the United States at the moment from this party or that party, and that confusion or the mystery that you have there will automatically be resolved by you by just taking some information that you got from somewhere else. That person looks like a so-and-so, or I remember seeing that person, or whatever it is. You just immediately put that information in there to make your mind have this sense of calm. Now, if you've been doing that for a long period of time, and I certainly was very imaginative through primary school and high school and developed that as a very bad habit. And so when it came time for me to apply study technology, a lot of the time I would read material and I didn't actually understand it, but I wouldn't feel confusion. And the result of that would be I would have to go back, and sometimes I would get to the end of it and then try to apply it, and I couldn't. So the test really of whether or not you understood it, not necessarily whether or not you were confused, is can you apply it and do it correctly and get a result with it at the end. So sometimes I couldn't apply it, and then I go, but I understand everything. I didn't get any confusion. So the situation there can be that you go back and have a look over all the concepts in the material that you're studying and see and test yourself. Do I really understand that? What is the definition of that word? Now, much of the time for myself, I had a definition for the particular word I was asking myself about. It was an imagined, a made-up definition because I studied etymology, or the origin of words, or how words were first formed. I would look at something and I would say, well, the reason for that is blah. Like, let's just take the word confusion, for example. Con could mean together, and fuse could mean mix. So if you didn't know what the definition of confusing, you just could mean mixing things together, which is literally the derivation of it, but it's not the current English usage of the word confusion. So you do have to watch yourself that being confused can also be masked by your own imagination and your own ability to make stuff up as you're going along, and that relates to that mental mechanism that automatically inserts things so that you don't have a mystery, which happens in life all the time. Okay, so I'm just going to check back with Mandeep and see if there are any other questions or anything that you didn't get. If you did understand everything so far and you can give me a thumbs up, that'd be great to see or get an acknowledgement from you. Okay, so that's all I have for right now. I wanted to touch on that particular point of confusion, and then I'm going to mention a couple of things. So the study technology, as I mentioned by Ron Hubbard, is so broad. There are books that you can study, and we have books that are basically at different levels. And if someone perhaps is in primary school, we would have something like Learning How to Learn. But as I had a guest on the webinar yesterday, she was telling us that she was a university graduate and she studied this book, and it revealed for her the use of misunderstood word clearing, and it changed her life. And she did that simple course that was perhaps, let's say, for primary school students, but she still used it and she was a university graduate. Now, the next one up, we have another one, Study Skills for Life, and that's a book that you can get. And again, that would be a little bit more toward high school sort of level, adolescence. And then this is the course that I did, the very first one, called the Basic Study Manual. It's a bit thicker, and it goes over all the different study tools, and again, goes to a little bit greater depth and covers a lot more. So if you're interested in any of these books, there will be a link that is joining on the Zoom chat. There they go, they appear there now. If you want to get any of these books, or if you're not certain about which book, because you're not certain about the path that you're taking or what it is that you want to learn, because there are different sort of tools for different types of learning, there is a link there for you to have a free consultation with one of our staff, no obligation, but to get more information on what you could do and how you could approach learning more about study and learning, we certainly are able to help you. The emphasis of study and learning is very, very large in Scientology, and it is that reason that I started with this entire series on the subject, because as we go along, the next subject we're going to deal with is motivation. Without the ability to study or learn effectively, a lot of these life tools and life hacks and things may be missing your understanding. So get the information, use our help. We are definitely very happy to pass things along to you. So for right now, I'm just having a look across to Mandeep to see if I've got the signal to end up. And it looks like I do. So for now, that's it from me. I'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday. I'm here 1 p.m. with another webinar, and I do not recall what the subject is, but I hope you will join me. So, Shanae for today, and we'll see you next time.